The October rain fell steadily on Riverside Cemetery as Elena Martinez clutched her umbrella, walking the familiar path to her father's grave. 6 months had passed since Vincent Martinez was laid to rest, and she still visited every week, bringing fresh flowers and quiet conversation about her teaching job at Lincoln Elementary. But today was different, terrifyingly different. 20 men in black suits stood in a perfect circle around her father's tombstone, their expensive shoes sinking into the wet grass. Their faces were stone, their hands folded professionally in front of them, like some twisted honor guard. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs as she froze 30 feet away, her white roses trembling in her grasp. In the center of the circle stood a man who commanded attention without saying a word. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair slicked back and eyes that seemed to pierce through the gray morning mist. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Elena's monthly salary. And when his gaze found hers across the cemetery, time seemed to stop. Roberto Silva had been expecting this moment for 6 months. He'd known eventually Vincent's daughter would appear, and he'd rehearsed what he would say. But seeing her now, this beautiful woman with her father's stubborn chin and eyes full of confusion and fear, words failed him. "Ma'am," he called out, his voice carrying authority that made lesser men tremble. "Don't be afraid. We're here to pay our respects." Elena's mouth went dry. These weren't mourners. These were something else entirely, something dangerous. Her father had been a simple mechanic who fixed cars and coached Little League on weekends. What could men like these possibly want with his grave? "Who are you?" she managed to whisper, though her voice carried further than she intended in the cemetery's silence. Roberto stepped forward, leaving his men behind. As he approached, Elena noticed the expensive watch on his wrist, the way his suit was tailored to perfection, the confidence in every step. This was a man who owned things, important things, dangerous things. "My name is Roberto Silva," he said, stopping just close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and intoxicating. "Your father saved my life 15 years ago. I've come to settle a debt." Elena's world tilted. Her father, Vincent Martinez, had never mentioned saving anyone's life. He'd been a quiet man who worked on engines and came home tired every night, grease under his fingernails and contentment in his smile. What debt? What life? "I think you have the wrong person," she said, taking a step backward. "My father was just a mechanic." Roberto's eyes softened with something that might have been sympathy, but his voice remained firm. "Your father was much more than that, Elena, and now that he's gone, his debt passes to you." The way he said her name, like he'd been saying it for years, like it belonged in his mouth, made her shiver in a way that had nothing to do with the October chill. Thunder rolled overhead, and the rain began to fall harder. 2. Elena's living room had never felt smaller. Roberto Silva sat on her worn fabric couch like he owned it, his presence filling every corner of her modest apartment. 2 of his men flanked the door while another stood by the window, their eyes constantly scanning the street below. "This is insane." Elena paced between her kitchen and living room, her wet hair still dripping from their rushed drive from the cemetery. "My father never mentioned you, never mentioned saving anyone's life." "I would have known." Roberto watched her pace with the patience of a predator. There was something captivating about her fury, the way her cheeks flushed, how her eyes sparked with indignation. Vincent had been right about his daughter. She had fire. 15 years ago, your father was Detective Vincent Martinez, LAPD, Roberto said quietly. He started as an honest cop, but the job wore him down. When Anthony Ricci approached him with money to look the other way on certain activities, Vincent took it. For 3 years, he was on Ricci's payroll. Elena stopped pacing. "Detective?" Her father had been a mechanic for as long as she could remember. She was 13 when they moved to this quiet neighborhood, when everything changed, when her father seemed to age overnight and started working with his hands instead of carrying a badge. "You're lying." "Am I?" Roberto pulled out his phone, scrolling to a photograph. He handed it to her, and Elena's breath caught. There was her father, 20 years younger, wearing a police uniform and shaking hands with a young man who looked remarkably like Roberto. The young man's shirt was torn and bloody, his face grateful. "But your father's conscience finally caught up with him," Roberto continued. "When he discovered Ricci was planning to eliminate witnesses who could testify against the family, Vincent realized he'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. He came to me, told me he was going to testify against Ricci, and needed someone to protect his family when the retaliation came." Eleanor sank into her armchair, staring at the photograph. This changed everything. Her entire childhood, her understanding of who her father was, all of it built on lies. He saved your life by changing sides? He pulled me out of a warehouse fire that Ricci had ordered, the same fire that destroyed evidence against him. But Vincent also gathered new evidence, enough to put Ricci away for 15 years. He gave me justice, Elena. He gave me my life back by choosing to do the right thing, even when it meant destroying his own. Why didn't he tell me? Because he wanted you to have a normal life, away from my world. Roberto leaned forward, his dark eyes intense. But now he's gone, and his enemies remember his face. They remember what he cost them, which means they'll come for you. What enemies? He fixed cars for a living. Elena, Roberto's voice was gentle but firm, I'm the head of the Silva family. We control most of California's business interests. Your father's testimony put away Anthony Ricci, and Ricci was released from prison 3 weeks ago. The blood drained from Elena's face. Prison? Crime families? Her father had been involved with the Mafia, and now she was sitting in her living room with a man who might as well have been wearing a target on his back. I want you to leave, she whispered. Roberto stood, straightening his suit jacket. I can't do that. I owe your father a debt that can never be repaid. But I can protect his daughter. I don't need protection from a criminal. The words hung in the air like a slap. Roberto's men tensed, but he held up a hand, stopping them. Elena realized she'd just insulted one of the most dangerous men in California, and he was letting it slide. Maybe not, Roberto said, walking toward the door. But when Ricci comes calling, remember that your father trusted me with what mattered most to him. He paused at the threshold, looking back. My number's on your counter. When you're ready to stop being stubborn and start being smart, call me. The door closed with a soft click, leaving Elena alone with her shattered world and a business card that felt like dynamite in her hand. 3. The coffee shop attack happened 3 days later, just as Elena was beginning to convince herself that Roberto Silva had been nothing more than an elaborate hallucination brought on by grief and too much caffeine. She was grading papers at Corner Cafe, her usual Tuesday afternoon routine, when the bell above the door chimed and 3 men walked in. Not men like Roberto's polished professionals. These were different, hungry, dangerous in a way that made her stomach clench with primal fear. The one in front had prison tattoos crawling up his neck and dead eyes that swept the cafe until they found her. When he smiled, Elena saw gold teeth and malice. Elena Martinez? His voice was rough like gravel being churned in a cement mixer. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like concrete. I'm sorry. Do I know you? Your daddy's little girl. He approached her table, his companions flanking him. We knew your daddy real good. Sent us away for a long, long time. Elena's hand moved instinctively toward her purse, where Roberto's business card had lived for 3 days. The man noticed the movement and laughed. Looking for your boyfriend? The pretty boy in the fancy suit. The man leaned over her table, close enough that she could smell cigarettes and something worse on his breath. He ain't coming, sweetheart. Time to pay daddy's debts. That's when the window exploded. Roberto Silva came through the cafe's front window in a shower of glass and fury, moving with lethal precision. Elena had never seen violence like this, controlled, efficient, devastating. He took down the first man with an elbow to the throat, spun and caught the second with a knee to the ribs that made an awful cracking sound. The leader reached for something inside his jacket, but Roberto was already there, his hand clamping down on the man's wrist with enough force to make him scream. Touch her again. Roberto's voice was ice and death, and I'll make sure your funeral is closed casket. The man's face went white. Silva, we didn't know she was under your protection. Now you do. Roberto twisted the man's arm until he dropped to his knees. Tell Ricci that Vincent Martinez's daughter is off limits. Tell him if he wants to settle old scores he can come see me directly. The 3 men limped out of the cafe, leaving behind broken glass and Elena's shattered sense of security. The other customers had fled during the fight, leaving them alone among the wreckage. Roberto turned to her, and Elena saw blood on his knuckles, concern in his dark eyes. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to speak. Her hands were trembling so violently she couldn't hold her coffee cup. I had someone watching the cafe, Roberto explained, noting her confused expression. My men have been keeping distant surveillance on your daily routine since I first contacted you. When they reported suspicious activity, I came immediately. Eleanor looked at this man who had just crashed through a window to save her, this dangerous stranger who moved through violence like it was a dance he'd perfected. Her father had trusted him. Maybe it was time she did too. "What happens now?" she whispered. Roberto's hand covered hers, warm and steady. "Now you let me keep my promise to your father." She nodded, and everything changed. 4. Roberto's mansion in Malibu was like stepping into another world. Eleanor stood in the marble foyer, her overnight bag clutched in white-knuckled hands, trying to process the crystal chandeliers, oil paintings, and luxury that surrounded her like an expensive prison. "This is temporary," Roberto said, though his tone suggested otherwise, "until we neutralize the threat." Eleanor followed him through rooms that belonged in magazines, past windows that showed infinity pools and ocean views that probably cost more than her annual salary. Everything was perfect, cold, beautiful, and nothing like the warm chaos of her father's house where she'd grown up. "You said you'd tell me the truth," she said, as they entered a library with floor-to-ceiling books and leather furniture that whispered money. "All of it." Roberto poured himself scotch from a crystal decanter, his movements precise and practiced. "Your father was investigating corruption in the LAPD when he stumbled onto something bigger, but he was also struggling financially, worried about providing for his family. When Ricci offered him money to overlook certain activities, Vincent took it. He handed her a glass of wine, something expensive that tasted like it cost more than her car. Elena sank into a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. For 3 years, Vincent was caught between two worlds, the cop he wanted to be and the man he'd become. But when Ricci ordered a hit on a witness family that included children, Vincent finally drew the line. He came to me, confessed everything, and asked for protection in exchange for his testimony. "But we never got new identities," Elena protested. "We just moved across town. Because I guaranteed your safety personally." Roberto met her eyes. "Your father saved my life by choosing to do the right thing. So I made sure his family stayed safe. For 15 years, my men have been maintaining protective surveillance on you, Elena. Not constant watching, but regular check-ins to ensure Ricci's people never got close." The wine turned sour in her mouth. "You've been watching me for 15 years? Protecting you," Roberto corrected. "My men would drive by your school. Your work. Make sure you got home safely on dates that ran late. Discreet protection, not surveillance. The kind your father requested. Invisible but effective." Elena set down her wine glass with shaking hands. "That's still a violation of privacy. It kept you alive. It's..." She stood up, pacing to the window. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before them, beautiful and isolating. "You're telling me my entire adult life has been a lie." Roberto stood too, moving behind her until she could feel his warmth against her back. "Your life has been exactly what your father wanted it to be. Safe, normal, free. Nothing about this is normal." Elena whirled around, and suddenly they were inches apart. She could smell his cologne again, see the concern in his eyes, feel the magnetic pull that had been building since that first moment in the cemetery. "No," Roberto said quietly, his voice rough. Nothing about this is normal." For a heartbeat, Elena thought he might kiss her. For a heartbeat, she wanted him to. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway, and Roberto stepped back, his professional mask sliding into place. "Marco," he called, and a tall man with silver hair appeared in the doorway. "Sir, we've got movement on the Ricci properties. Looks like they're planning something bigger." Roberto's jaw tightened. "Double the security around the house, and get Isabella somewhere safe." "Isabella?" Elena's heart lurched. "My sister?" Roberto turned to her, and she saw something that might have been regret in his eyes. "Ricci doesn't just want revenge, Elena. He wants to finish what he started 15 years ago." The wine glass slipped from Elena's nerveless fingers, shattering on the marble floor like her illusions of safety. 5. The storm hit Malibu at midnight, turning Roberto's mansion into an island surrounded by sheets of rain and howling wind. Elena stood at her bedroom window, watching lightning illuminate the churning ocean below, unable to sleep, knowing that somewhere out there, men were planning to hurt her family. A soft knock at her door made her turn. Roberto stood in the doorway, no longer wearing his usual armor of expensive suits. Instead, he wore dark jeans and a black sweater that clung to his broad shoulders, making him look younger, more human, and infinitely more dangerous to her peace of mind. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Elena shook her head. She changed into pajama pants and an oversized sweater, feeling exposed despite being fully clothed. Is Isabella safe? Marco has her at a safe house in San Diego. She thinks it's a surprise vacation. Roberto stepped into the room, and suddenly the spacious bedroom felt intimate. She doesn't know about your father's past. Good. She shouldn't have to carry this. Elena turned back to the window, watching the storm rage. How do you do it? Live with all this danger, all this violence? Roberto moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. You learn to compartmentalize, to separate the man from the job. And which one are you right now? The question hung between them, loaded with meaning neither was ready to address. Lightning flashed again, and in the brief illumination, Elena saw Roberto's reflection in the window, saw the longing in his dark eyes, the careful control he maintained even in private moments. Right now, he said quietly, I'm just a man who owes your father everything. Trying to keep his promise, Elena turned to face him, and the space between them felt electric, charged with more than just the storm outside. What if I don't want to be an obligation? Roberto's control slipped for just a moment, and Elena saw something raw and hungry in his expression before he shuttered it away. Elena, you don't understand what you're saying. Don't I? She stepped closer, close enough to see the slight flutter of his pulse at his throat, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his carefully controlled frame. I'm 28 years old, Roberto. I know exactly what I'm saying. Your father trusted me to protect you. Roberto's voice was strained, like he was fighting a war with himself. Not to what? Feel something real for the first time in years. Elena reached up, her fingertips barely grazing his cheek. Because that's what this is, isn't it? What's been building between us since that first day in the cemetery? Roberto caught her hand, his fingers warm and strong against hers. Elena, my world is dangerous, violent. I've done things. I don't care about your past. The words surprised even her with their vehemence. All I care about is that when those men came for me, you came too. That when I needed someone to trust, you were there. Thunder crashed overhead, and the lights flickered. In the momentary darkness, Elena felt Roberto's control finally break. His hands framed her face, his thumbs tracing her cheekbones with devastating gentleness. If I kiss you, he said, his voice rough with want, everything changes. Elena smiled, the first real smile she'd felt since her father's funeral. Good. I'm tired of things staying the same. When Roberto's lips met hers, it was like the storm outside had moved inside her chest, soft at first, tentative, then deeper as Elena melted against him, her hands fisting in his sweater. He tasted like scotch and danger, and something indefinably him that made her head spin. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roberto rested his forehead against hers. This complicates everything, he whispered. Elena smiled against his lips. The best things usually do. Outside, the storm raged on, but inside Roberto's mansion, in the circle of his arms, Elena finally felt safe. The 6. Elena woke to find Roberto gone, and the mansion eerily quiet. Sunlight streamed through her bedroom windows, revealing the aftermath of the storm, scattered palm fronds, debris, and an unsettling stillness that made her skin crawl. She found Marco in the kitchen, his usual composed demeanor cracked with worry. "Where's Roberto?" she asked, accepting the coffee he offered with hands that trembled slightly. "Emergency meeting. The storm provided cover for some unwelcome visitors." Marco's voice was carefully neutral, but Elena caught the underlying tension. 3 of our perimeter guards found bullet holes in their cars this morning. Elena's blood turned to ice water. "Ricci?" "Most likely. Roberto's handling it." Marco studied her face. "But there's something else. Something about your father that Roberto needs to tell you himself." Before Elena could respond, the front door opened with enough force to rattle the windows. Roberto strode in, his face thunderous, his expensive suit rumpled like he'd been running. Behind him came 2 men Elena didn't recognize, one carrying a laptop, the other a manila envelope thick with documents. "Elena!" Roberto's voice was sharp, professional, nothing like the tender man who'd kissed her senseless the night before. "We need to talk. Now." The transformation was jarring. This was Roberto Silva, Mafia boss, not the man who'd held her during the storm. Elena followed him into his office, a masculine space dominated by dark wood and leather that suddenly felt like an interrogation room. "Sit," Roberto commanded, then seemed to catch himself. His voice softened marginally. "Please." Elena perched on the edge of a leather chair, watching as Roberto's men set up their laptop and spread documents across his desk. Whatever this was, it was big and bad. Last night's attack wasn't random, Roberto began, pacing behind his desk like a caged predator. It was reconnaissance. Ricci's men weren't trying to get in. They were testing our security, learning our patterns. For what? Roberto stopped pacing, his dark eyes meeting hers. For the real attack, which is coming tonight. Elena's mouth went dry. How do you know? Because Roberto's voice went deadly quiet. Anthony Ricci called me an hour ago. He wants to make a trade. The laptop screen filled with surveillance footage, grainy, black and white, but clear enough to make Elena's heart stop. Isabella, her sister, walking out of what looked like a coffee shop, laughing at something off camera. Normal. Unaware. He has Isabella, Elena's voice cracked. No. Roberto's hands clenched into fists. But he knows where she is, and he's made his terms very clear. You, for the guarantee that your sister stays safe. Elena stood on unsteady legs. Then, there's no choice. Like hell. Roberto's mask slipped, revealing the fury underneath. I'm not trading you to that psychopath. It's not your decision. The hell it isn't. Roberto slammed his hand on the desk, making the documents jump. I promised your father I'd protect you, and I'll be damned if I break that promise now. My father's dead, Elena shouted back, her own control snapping. And this debt you keep talking about, it's destroying everything I care about. The words hung between them like a physical blow. Roberto's face went pale, and Elena immediately regretted her outburst. But before she could apologize, one of Roberto's men cleared his throat. Sir, he said quietly, there's something else. About Detective Martinez, the complete timeline. Roberto's expression grew guarded. Show her. The man opened the manila envelope, pulling out a detailed timeline that made Elena's blood run cold. The complete story of her father's involvement with Ricci, first as an honest cop, then the corruption, then the final redemption. Your father's journey wasn't simple, Roberto said quietly. He was corrupted, yes, but he was also the man who ultimately brought down Ricci's entire operation when he realized he'd gone too far. The debt your father owed wasn't just to me, Elena. When he chose to testify, he saved dozens of innocent lives that Ricci would have destroyed. Elena stared at the timeline, finally understanding the complete picture of her father's complicated legacy. The honest cop who'd fallen, then risen again, when it mattered most. How much time do we have? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ricci wants an answer by sunset. Roberto took her hands in his, and Elena didn't pull away. But I'm not giving you to him, Elena. I'll find another way. Elena looked into Roberto's dark eyes, seeing the determination there, the protective fury that had been building since that first day in the cemetery. Then she looked at the timeline of her father's redemption, at the surveillance footage of her innocent sister, at the impossible choice that had been placed before them. What if there is no other way? She whispered. Roberto's grip on her hands tightened. Then we make one. Outside, the sun climbed higher in a cloudless sky, marking the hours until sunset, like a countdown to war. 7. The war room in Roberto's mansion buzzed with lethal efficiency. Maps of Los Angeles covered every surface, marked with red pins showing Ricci's known locations and blue pins marking Silva family assets. Elena sat in the corner, watching Roberto command his soldiers with the cold precision of a general preparing for battle. Michael, I want eyes on every Ricci property from Long Beach to Pasadena, Roberto ordered, his voice carrying absolute authority. Tony, move our people out of the warehouse district. If Ricci wants to play games, he'll hit our business interests first. Eleanor studied the man she'd fallen for, seeing him in his element for the first time. This wasn't the tender lover who'd held her during the storm, or even the protective guardian who'd saved her at the coffee shop. This was Roberto Silva, head of the most powerful crime family on the West Coast. And he was magnificent in his fury. What about the girl? Asked Vincent, Roberto's lieutenant, a scarred man with intelligent eyes. Ricci's deadline is in 4 hours. Roberto's jaw tightened. Elena stays here. We find another solution. Sir, Vincent continued carefully, with respect, Ricci has 20 men positioned around the city. He's not bluffing about the sister. Eleanor stood, every eye in the room turning to her. I can hear you, you know. And I'm not the girl. I'm the solution you're all dancing around. Roberto's dark eyes flashed with something between anger and panic. Absolutely not. We've discussed this. No, you've decided this. Elena moved to the center of the room, addressing Roberto's soldiers as much as him. But it's my choice. My sister's life, my father's sins to answer for. Your father paid his debt, did he? Elena picked up the timeline from the evidence pile, her father's complex journey laid bare in black and white. Or did he just pass the responsibility onto his daughters? The room fell silent, except for the ticking of Roberto's antique clock. 4 hours. Elena could feel the weight of time pressing down on them like a physical force. Roberto dismissed his men with a sharp gesture, waiting until they were alone before crossing to Elena. His hands framed her face with desperate gentleness. I can't lose you, he said, his voice raw. Not now. Not when I've finally found something worth protecting beyond my family's legacy. Elena's heart clenched at the vulnerability in his admission. And I can't live with Isabella's blood on my hands, or with knowing that my father's sacrifice means nothing if I can't protect what he died for. There has to be another way. Elena pressed her lips to his, soft and sweet and tasting of goodbye. Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. Roberto's phone buzzed. A text message with a single address and the words, 1 hour early. Come alone or the sister dies. Elena saw the address and felt her world tilt. St. Mary's Cathedral, where her father used to take them for Christmas Mass when she was little, where she'd prayed for his soul just 6 months ago. He's escalating, Roberto said grimly, changing the terms, because he knows you'll come for me. Elena grabbed Roberto's hand, squeezing tight. Promise me something. When this is over, whatever happens, promise me you'll make sure Isabella has a normal life, away from all of this. Roberto pulled her against his chest, his heart hammering beneath her cheek. Promise me you'll fight. Whatever Ricci has planned, whatever he wants, you fight to come back to me. Elena closed her eyes, memorizing the scent of his cologne, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the safety of his arms around her. I promise. But even as she said it, they both knew some promises were impossible to keep. 8. St. Mary's Cathedral loomed against the darkening sky like a monument to lost faith. Elena approached the massive oak doors alone, as instructed, her heart hammering against her ribs with each step. Roberto's men were positioned in the shadows around the cathedral, but she knew they might as well be miles away if Ricci decided to end this permanently. The interior was dimly lit by votive candles and security lighting, casting long shadows between the pews. Elena's footsteps echoed in the sacred space as she walked down the center aisle, memories of childhood Christmas masses mixing with present terror. Anthony Ricci waited at the altar, and Elena's breath caught at her first sight of him. 15 years in prison had carved deep lines into his face and turned his hair steel gray, but his eyes held the same cold intelligence that had made him dangerous enough to corrupt half the LAPD. He wasn't alone. 6 men flanked him, all armed, all watching her approach with predatory focus. Elena Martinez, Ricci said, his voice carrying easily in the cathedral's acoustics. You look just like your mother. Same stubborn chin, same foolish nobility. Elena stopped 10 feet from the altar, close enough to see the cruel amusement in Ricci's eyes. You knew my mother. I knew your whole family. Your father brought you to my restaurant once, when you were maybe 7 years old before he decided to betray me. You ordered spaghetti and got sauce all over your white dress. Ricci smiled, and it was worse than his anger. Such a sweet little girl. I wondered then what kind of woman you'd become. The casual mention of that memory, something Elena had forgotten until this moment, made her skin crawl. This man had been watching her family for longer than she'd realized. You have what you wanted, Elena said, proud that her voice remained steady. I'm here, let my sister go. Ricci laughed, the sound echoing off the cathedral's stone walls. Oh, my dear child, you think this is about your sister? About some simple exchange? Elena's blood chilled. What do you mean? Your father cost me 15 years of my life. My business empire, my reputation. My son died while I was locked away, and I missed his funeral because of Vincent Martinez's testimony. Ricci's voice hardened to diamond. Did you really think I'd settle for just killing you quickly? Elena took an involuntary step backward. What do you want? Justice. Real justice. Your father betrayed me after I treated him like family, so now I'm going to destroy his family the same way he destroyed mine. Ricci gestured to one of his men, who produced a tablet and turned it toward Elena. The screen showed surveillance footage of Isabella, laughing with friends outside a San Diego coffee shop, completely unaware of the danger circling her. Timestamp, 20 minutes ago. My men are watching your sister, but they're also watching someone else. Ricci swiped the screen, revealing new footage. Your precious Roberto Silva, racing through traffic to get here. Such a romantic, isn't he? Willing to die for love. Elena's heart stopped. You said come alone. You did. But love makes people predictable. I knew Roberto would never really let you face this by yourself. Ricci's smile turned vicious. In exactly 3 minutes, my men are going to kill him in the cathedral parking lot. Then they're going to kill your sister in San Diego. And then I'm going to tell you exactly how your father begged for his life before I had him eliminated 6 months ago. The cathedral seemed to spin around Elena. What? My father died of a heart attack. Your father died because I decided it was time. The heart attack was just theatrical. Ricci checked his expensive watch. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Elena's mind raced. Roberto was walking into a trap. Isabella was in danger. And her father had been murdered. All of it, all the grief and confusion and pain of the last 6 months, had been orchestrated by this monster, standing at God's altar like a demon wearing human skin. Please, Elena whispered, hating herself for the weakness, but unable to stop the words. Take me, kill me, but leave them out of this. Oh, I am going to kill you, Ricci assured her, but first you're going to watch everyone you love die, just like I watched my world crumble. That's when Elena heard it, the distinctive rumble of Roberto's Maserati pulling into the cathedral parking lot. 2 minutes early, which meant he was walking into Ricci's trap ahead of schedule. Elena closed her eyes, said a prayer to whatever saints protected the desperate, and made the most important decision of her life. You want to destroy what I love? She said, opening her eyes to meet Ricci's triumphant gaze. Then you better make sure you kill me first. Before anyone could react, Elena lunged for the heavy brass candlestick on the altar, swinging it at the nearest gunman, with all the strength fear and fury could provide. 9. Chaos erupted in the sacred space. Elena's makeshift weapon connected with the gunman's temple, sending him crashing into the altar rail. She dove behind the heavy marble structure as gunfire exploded around her, ancient stone chipping and sparking where bullets struck. Take her alive, Ricci roared over the gunfire. I want her to watch. Elena crawled along the base of the altar, her heart hammering as she searched for another weapon, another option, anything that might buy Roberto time to realize this was a trap. Her hand closed around a heavy brass crucifix, and she clutched it like a lifeline. The cathedral doors burst open with a sound like thunder, and Roberto Silva entered the sanctuary, like an avenging angel dressed in Armani. His gun was already drawn, his movements fluid and deadly as he took cover behind a pillar. Elena! His voice cut through the gunfire, relief and fury warring in his tone. It's a trap, she screamed back. He knows you're here. Roberto's answering gunfire was precise and devastating. Elena watched in terrified awe as he moved through the cathedral. Like violence was a language he spoke fluently, each shot calculated, each movement designed to bring him closer to her position. But Ricci had been planning this for months. His men emerged from hiding places Elena hadn't even noticed, behind confessionals, in the choir loft, from the vestry. Roberto was outnumbered 6-1. Surrender, Silva, Ricci called out, his voice echoing from somewhere near the altar. Walk away now, and the girl dies quickly. Roberto's response was another perfectly placed shot that sent one of Ricci's men tumbling from the choir loft. Counteroffer, Ricci. Let her go and I'll make your death painless. Elena risked a glance around the altar's edge, seeing Roberto pinned behind his pillar, reload calmly despite the impossible odds. This was the man her father had trusted with their family's safety. This was the man she'd fallen in love with, not despite his dangerous nature, but because of the honor that drove him to face death for her sake. A bullet chipped marble inches from her face, and Elena realized one of Ricci's men was flanking her position. She gripped the brass crucifix tighter, waiting until he rounded the altar's corner before swinging it with every ounce of strength she possessed. The man dropped like a stone, his gun skittering across the marble floor. Elena grabbed it with shaking hands, checking the safety the way her father had taught her when she was 16, a lesson that had seemed pointless at the time, but which her training instructor at the police academy had reinforced. Vincent Martinez had made sure his daughter knew how to protect herself, even when he couldn't tell her why. Behind you, she screamed as another gunman tried to flank Roberto's position. Roberto spun and fired in one smooth motion, his trust in her warning absolute. The gunman fell, but not before getting off a shot that found its mark. Roberto stumbled, red blooming across his white shirt. Elena's world narrowed to that spreading stain, to Roberto's pained expression as he pressed his hand against his shoulder. Rage, like nothing she'd ever felt before, consumed her completely. She stood from behind the altar, the unfamiliar weight of the gun steady in her hands, and put herself between Roberto and Ricci's remaining men. "Enough!" Her voice carried throughout the cathedral, stopping the gunfire through sheer, unexpected force. "You want me, Ricci? Here I am." Anthony Ricci emerged from his hiding place, his own weapon drawn but lowered, a smile of genuine appreciation on his weathered face. Vincent Martinez's little girl has teeth after all. How delightfully unexpected. "Elena, get down." Roberto's voice was strained with pain and desperation, but Elena kept the gun trained on Ricci, her father's lessons and her police academy training coming back to her in crystal-clear detail. Stance, breathing, sight picture. "Call off your men now." "Or what? You'll shoot me in God's house." Ricci took a step closer, testing her resolve. "You're not a killer, child. You're a school teacher who reads bedtime stories and grades math papers." "You're right," Elena said quietly. "I'm not a killer. But I'm Vincent Martinez's daughter, and I'm done being afraid of my father's past." Ricci's expression shifted, something like respect flickering in his cold eyes. "Your father said almost exactly the same thing 15 years ago when he decided to betray me. Then you know I'm serious." "Oh, I know you are." Ricci raised his gun, pointing it directly at Roberto. "But you're forgetting something important, my dear. I don't need to kill you to destroy you. I just need to kill him." Elena saw Ricci's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Roberto try to raise his own weapon despite his wound, saw the impossible choice crystallizing in the space of a heartbeat. Time slowed, and Elena Martinez, elementary school teacher and daughter of a corrupted cop who'd found redemption, made the decision that would define the rest of her life. 10. The gunshot echoed through St. Mary's Cathedral like the voice of judgment itself. Elena watched Anthony Ricci's eyes widen in shock as he looked down at the spreading red stain across his chest, then up at her face with something that might have been admiration. "Well," he said, his voice already growing weak, "Vincent would have been proud." Ricci collapsed beside the altar, his weapon clattering uselessly across the marble floor. The remaining gunmen froze, uncertain without their leader's commands, giving Roberto the opening he needed to take them down with methodical precision, despite his wounded shoulder. Elena stood in the sudden silence, the smoking gun heavy in her trembling hands, staring at what she'd done. She'd killed a man, in a church, to save the man she loved. "Elena." Roberto's voice was gentle, careful, as he approached her like she might spook. "It's over. You can put the gun down now." She looked at him, really looked, taking in the pale complexion from blood loss, the way he favored his left side, the concern in his dark eyes that was entirely for her despite his own pain. "Are you all right?" she asked. The question absurd given the circumstances, but the only thing her shocked mind could produce. Roberto's laugh was rough but genuine. "You just saved my life, and you're asking if I'm all right?" The gun slipped from Elena's nerveless fingers, clattering on the cathedral floor. Roberto caught her as her knees gave out, pulling her against his chest with his good arm. "I killed him," she whispered against his shirt, the reality finally hitting her. "You protected your family," Roberto said firmly. "You did what you had to do." "But in a church." "God understands the difference between murder and justice," Roberto interrupted, his lips brushing her hair. "Your father would have understood too." Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Elena pulled back to look at Roberto's face, memorizing every line, every shadow, knowing that after tonight, everything would change again. "They'll arrest us," she said. Roberto smiled, and despite everything, the blood, the violence, the death, it was tender and full of promise. "Let me worry about that. I've got friends in high places. Detective Morrison owes me several favors, and the cathedral's security cameras have been experiencing technical difficulties all evening." "I don't want to lose you," Elena admitted, the words coming from somewhere deeper than fear or logic. "You won't." Roberto cupped her face in his hands, his thumb tracing her cheekbone. "I made you a promise, remember? I always keep my promises." The cathedral doors burst open, But instead of police, Marco rushed in with a team of Roberto's men. Elena watched in amazement as they began efficiently coordinating with arriving emergency personnel, making sure the scene was documented as a clear case of self-defense against known criminals. "Sir," Marco reported, approaching them with a cell phone, "the San Diego team has Isabella. She's safe and completely unaware anything happened." Elena's knees nearly gave out again with relief. Isabella was safe. Roberto was alive. The nightmare that had begun 6 months ago at her father's funeral was finally over. "And Ricci's men?" Roberto asked. "Scattered. Without their boss, they're just low-level muscle looking for new employment." Marco's expression was grim but satisfied. "The Ricci family is finished." Roberto nodded, then turned back to Elena. "There's something else. Something I should have told you before." Elena's heart clenched. After everything they'd been through, what other revelations could there possibly be? "Your father," Roberto continued, his voice gentle. "Before he died, before Ricci had him killed, he sent me something. A letter, to be opened only if something happened to him." Marco handed Roberto an envelope, yellowed with age and sealed with wax. Elena recognized her father's handwriting immediately. "He knew Ricci would come for your family eventually," Roberto explained, "and he wanted to make sure you had a choice about your future." Elena took the letter with shaking hands. Breaking the seal her father had placed there months before his death. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in her father's familiar handwriting, but also something else, a cashier's check made out to her for an amount that made her gasp. $2 million, she whispered. "Your father's share of certain legitimate investments over the years. Money he'd saved from his police pension and investments he'd made after leaving the force. Money he couldn't touch while Ricci was alive, but money he'd saved for you and Isabella." Roberto's voice was carefully neutral. "Enough for both of you to disappear completely if that's what you want. New identities, new lives, anywhere in the world." Elena stared at the check, at her father's final gift and final apology. Freedom, safety, the chance to be normal again. "Or," Roberto said quietly, "you could stay, with me, in my world." Elena looked up at the man who'd crashed through a window to save her, who'd protected her family for 15 years without asking for anything in return, who'd nearly died tonight because he couldn't bear to lose her. The choice was impossible, and easy, and hers to make. 11. 6 weeks later, Elena stood in the garden of Roberto's Malibu mansion, watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold and crimson. The November air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of salt and possibilities. Her father's letter lay open on the garden table beside her, its edges softened by frequent reading. Isabella's laughter drifted from the pool area where she was splashing with Marco's daughter, Sophia, both girls blissfully unaware of the violence that had brought them together. Elena had told her sister only that they were staying with friends while she figured out their next steps. Isabella, thrilled by the mansion and the pool and the adventure of it all, hadn't questioned the explanation. Having second thoughts? Elena turned to find Roberto approaching, moving carefully but no longer favoring his wounded shoulder. 6 weeks of healing had returned the confident grace to his movements, though Elena suspected she'd always be able to see the careful way he protected that side. "About which part?" she asked, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Staying in California, keeping my father's money, or falling in love with a man who owns half the West Coast?" Roberto's smile was warmth and promise, and just a hint of the danger that had first drawn her to him. "All of the above." Elena considered the question seriously. The past 6 weeks had been a careful dance of adjustment and discovery. Roberto had been patient, giving her space to process everything that had happened, while slowly introducing her to the reality of his world. She'd met his lieutenants, learned about his legitimate businesses, discovered that the Roberto Silva empire encompassed everything from shipping companies to tech startups to charitable foundations. "Your world isn't what I expected," she admitted. "What did you expect? More violence? More obvious criminality?" Elena sipped her wine, choosing her words carefully. "Instead, I find out you employ half of East Los Angeles, that your tech company is developing clean energy solutions, and that your charitable foundation has built 6 schools in underserved communities." Roberto moved to stand beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. "Did you think I was some kind of cartoon villain? I thought you were dangerous. I am dangerous." Roberto's voice carried absolute certainty. "To people who threaten what I protect, to men like Anthony Ricci who prey on the innocent, But danger and evil aren't the same thing, Elena. Elena turned to study his profile. This complex man who defied every category she tried to put him in. What are we doing, Roberto? What do you mean? This. Elena gestured between them at the growing intimacy that had developed despite her uncertainty about the future. Are we just playing house, waiting for me to decide whether I can handle your lifestyle? Or is this something real? Roberto set down his wineglass and turned to face her fully, his dark eyes serious. For me, this has been real since the moment I saw you standing in that cemetery, looking lost and beautiful and brave. Everything since then has just been waiting for you to catch up. Elena's heart stuttered. Roberto, I love you, he said simply. I know it's complicated. I know my world comes with risks your father spent his life trying to protect you from. But I love you, Elena Martinez, and I want you to stay. Not as someone I'm protecting out of obligation, but as my partner, my equal, my choice. Elena stared at him. This powerful man laying his heart bare in his garden overlooking the Pacific. Everything in her that had been carefully controlled and cautious screamed warnings about the impossibility of their situation. But everything else, everything that mattered, whispered yes. I love you too, she said, the words feeling like jumping off a cliff and growing wings at the same time. But I have conditions. Roberto's eyebrows rose, amusement mixing with hope in his expression. Conditions? Isabella gets to stay as normal as possible. Private school, college, whatever she wants, but away from the dangerous parts of your business. Done. I want to use some of my father's money to set up my own foundation. Education programs for at-risk kids. I'll match whatever you contribute. Elena smiled, feeling lighter than she had since her father's death. And I want to keep teaching, at least part-time. Elena! Roberto stepped closer, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness. You can have anything you want. Be anything you want. All I ask is that you do it here with me. Even if it means PTA meetings and parent-teacher conferences, especially if it means that. Elena laughed, rising on her toes to kiss him, tasting wine and promises and the beginning of something wonderful. Then yes, Roberto Silva, I choose you. I choose us. I choose this impossible, dangerous, beautiful life. Roberto's response was to spin her around in the garden, both of them laughing like teenagers, the sunset painting everything golden around them. From the pool, Isabella called out, Elena, come see the dolphin. Elena looked at Roberto, who grinned and took her hand. Come on, future Mrs. Silva. Your sister wants to show you a dolphin. Future Mrs. Silva? Elena's heart skipped. Roberto's smile was pure mischief. I told you I had plans for our future. Hand in hand, they walked toward the pool, toward Isabella's excited chatter, toward the sound of children playing, and the promise of normal moments in their extraordinary life. The dangerous world that had brought them together was still out there, Elena knew. There would be challenges, complications, moments when she'd question her choice to stay in Roberto's world, but there would also be this, love and laughter and family, protected by a man who understood the difference between power and honor. Elena Martinez had found her place in the world. It just happened to be in the arms of California's most dangerous man. 12. 1 year later, Elena Silva stood before the mirror in Roberto's master bedroom, adjusting the pearl necklace that had belonged to his grandmother. Today was their wedding day, and despite the careful planning, the security arrangements, and the guest list that read like a who's who of California's political and business elite, Elena felt surprisingly calm. You look beautiful, mija. Elena turned to find Isabella in the doorway, radiant in her maid-of-honor dress, holding the simple white roses they'd chosen for the bouquet. At 19, Isabella had grown into a confident young woman, thanks in part to her year at UCLA and the unwavering security that came with being Roberto Silva's sister-in-law-to-be. Not too simple, Elena asked, smoothing the elegant lines of her wedding dress. She'd chosen classic over elaborate, a decision that felt right for a woman marrying into the Silva family. Perfect for you, Isabella assured her, then lowered her voice. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Elena smiled at her sister's protective concern. Isabella knew more about Roberto's world now than she had a year ago, but she'd been carefully shielded from its darkest aspects. She saw Roberto as the man who'd given them a beautiful home, excellent security, and unlimited opportunities, which was exactly what Elena had wanted. I'm sure, Elena said, meaning it completely. Roberto makes me happy, Bella. He makes us both safe and loved and part of something bigger than ourselves. Isabella hugged her carefully, mindful of the dress. Then I'm happy too, and Papa would be proud of who you've become. Eleanor's throat tightened with emotion. The previous month, she and Roberto had quietly placed a new headstone on her father's grave, one that acknowledged both Vincent Martinez, the devoted father, and Detective Vincent Martinez, who'd found redemption in his final choice. It felt like forgiveness, finally. Mrs. Silva. Marco appeared in the doorway, looking unusually formal in his wedding suit. Mr. Silva asked me to give you this. He handed Elena a small wrapped box, and inside she found a delicate gold locket containing a picture of her parents on their wedding day. The accompanying note was in Roberto's bold handwriting, "So they can be with us today, all my love are." Elena blinked back tears, touched by Roberto's thoughtfulness. Even on their wedding day, he was thinking of ways to honor her family, to bridge the gap between who she'd been and who she was becoming. "Time to go, ladies," Marco announced. "The groom is getting impatient." The ceremony was held in the mansion's garden, overlooking the Pacific Ocean that had become Elena's favorite view in the world. White roses and twinkling lights transformed the space into something magical, and the guest list, carefully curated to include only people who genuinely supported their union, felt like family. Eleanor walked down the aisle alone, having chosen to honor her father's memory without trying to replace his presence. Roberto waited at the altar, devastating in his black tuxedo, his dark eyes shining with love and pride as she approached. The ceremony itself passed in a blur of spoken vows, exchanged rings, and the priest's traditional words. But Elena would always remember the moment Roberto lifted her veil, the tender smile on his face as he whispered, "Hello, Mrs. Silva," before kissing her in front of God and their chosen family. The reception was a celebration worthy of the Silva name. Excellent food, beautiful music, and dancing that lasted until the early hours of morning. Elena danced with Roberto, with Marco, with Isabella, and even with some of Roberto's business associates who'd become genuine friends over the past year. "Happy?" Roberto asked as they swayed together during the last dance of the evening, most of their guests having finally departed. "Completely," Elena replied, meaning it with every fiber of her being. "You. I've never been happier in my life." Roberto spun her gently, her wedding dress flowing around them. "Ready for our honeymoon?" Elena laughed. 2 weeks in Tuscany with no weapons, no business meetings and no one trying to kill us. I think I can manage that. Just wine and pasta and making love to my wife in a villa overlooking the Mediterranean. "Your wife," Elena repeated, testing the words. "I like the sound of that." "Good," Roberto said, pulling her closer, "because you're stuck with me now. Helena Silva, for better or worse, in sickness and health, in good times and bad, and in danger," Elena added with a teasing smile. "Especially in danger." Roberto's expression grew serious. "But I promise you, Elena, I will spend every day of our marriage making sure you never regret choosing this life, choosing me." Elena reached up to cup his face, seeing all the love and determination and protective fury that had drawn her to him from that first day in the cemetery. "I could never regret choosing love, Roberto, no matter how complicated or dangerous that love might be." As they kissed under the stars, surrounded by the security and luxury Roberto's world provided, Elena thought about the journey that had brought them here. From that terrifying moment of discovering 20 men in black suits around her father's grave to this perfect moment of dancing with her husband in their garden, everything had led to this. She was Elena Silva now, wife to California's most powerful man, stepmother to his extended family of soldiers and friends, and partner in building something beautiful from the ashes of old debts and ancient grudges. Tomorrow, they would fly to Italy for their honeymoon. Next month, Elena's foundation would open its first learning center in East Los Angeles. Next year, there would be new challenges, new adventures, and perhaps new additions to their family. But tonight there was just this: love and commitment and the promise of a future built on trust, respect, and the kind of devotion that could weather any storm. Elena Martinez had discovered 20 men in black suits surrounding her father's tombstone and thought her world was ending.